Welcome back everyone. In this video, I'm going to show you how to smoke a cheap supermarket brisket. Now the cheap supermarket briskets is not something I would always recommend starting with, but a lot of people do because they are cheap, easily accessible, but they are, as you can see, super lean and there's not much fat on them. So I'll show you a few tips and tricks along the way so you'll be able to get something decent out of a cheap supermarket brisket like that. So we'll get started with the trim. Honestly, because it's so lean, you don't want to be trimming much, if any, of that top fat off. Just a little bit of silver skin off the bottom, but seriously, you want to be leaving as much fat as possible on these. There's honestly not much at all to trim off this. As you can see, super lean, not much fat, so we want to be trying to hold as much fat and moisture in that as possible to prevent it from drying out. And then after that, you can go ahead, get your favorite beef rub, whatever you want to use. You can use salt, pepper, garlic if you want, or if you've got a favorite beef rub, go ahead and use that. And then we'll go ahead and get it seasoned up. And for anyone wondering, that's the Heavenly Hell, the grilled, the smoked, and the lovely steak and beef rub. Absolute winner in my books. I'll chuck a link down in the description if you want to check the Heavenly Hell stuff out. And the Weber setup, we are going with the snake method. If you want to see a real in-depth snake method video, I'll chuck some links down in the description as well. We won't touch too much on that today. We're going to focus on the cooking process of this cheap, lean supermarket brisket. We've got a cherry chunk from Natural Smoke ready to go at the start of our snake. Going to go with a 2x2 stack, and we'll get it started with 12 briquettes. And we're also going to be running a water pan for this cook just to help regulate our temperatures and also keep as much moisture in our cooker as possible to prevent this from drying out. Like I've said, because this thing is so lean, it's going to be really prone to drying out. So the more moisture we can keep in our barbecue, the better. So now our Weber's set up and up to temperature, we will get it in there and we're going to be smoking this at about the 275 Fahrenheit or 135 degrees Celsius range. Right, as you can see, we've got the start of our snake there. We'll go ahead and put our brisket about in the middle there. You don't want your brisket too close to the burning part of the snake, otherwise it will potentially burn it. You want it just so it's far enough away so it's not copping any direct heat. And then you'll also notice we've got our lid vent over this side now because our snake is burning over here and our wood chunks here. So we want that heat and smoke to be passing through and over the brisket. So make sure you put your lid vent opposite to where the snake's burning so the smoke and heat is always passing through the brisket. All right, just for reference, that little brisket is 1 kilo in weight. And now we've got it on. If you don't have a thermometer built into the barbecue, you're using like the old Weber kettles, you can always clip a meat probe onto your cooking grate so you've got an accurate reading on what's going on inside your Weber or whatever other barbecue you're using. So now this is smoking away. We're just going to leave it until we reach an internal temperature of around that 160 Fahrenheit or 71 degrees Celsius. And then we're going to wrap it up a bit later on. So we'll come back in a couple of hours. I reckon this is going to be about a 5 to 6 hour cook. But as always, we are going to use time as a very rough guide. And we're going to be going by internal temperature and feel to know when this brisket's done. So we'll come back soon. And as your snake's burning around, you can peep through the vent holes. So I know that our snake started about here and our snake's currently burning about here because we're about an hour in now. So I'm just going to rotate the lid vent around, like I said earlier, so your vent is always on the opposite side of the snake, so it passes through and over the brisket. All right, we're about 2.5 hours in. Let's open the Weber up and have a look. All right, we got some really nice color on there. Just looking really good. Bit of bark formation happening there. Check the internal. All right, so we're pretty much around that 160 Fahrenheit or 71 degrees Celsius where we want it to be at. I'm pretty happy with how that bark's coming along. You do have to sacrifice your bark to retain some of that moisture in my opinion. So we'll get this out and wrap it up. Right, so we'll put our brisket, some foil, and I'm also going to put a couple of nice bits of butter on top. If you've got some beef tallow, like rendered beef fat, you can also put some of that in, but obviously that's not easily accessible. So we're going to stick with butter today and we're going to wrap that up nice and tight. And we'll get it back in the Weber. Now, before we get the lid on, if you did have a bigger brisket that was sort of overhanging here, you obviously don't want it too close to that fire source like we spoke about earlier. So another trick you can use is to rotate your brisket away, because we're burnt out on this part of the snake where we started, and it won't hurt to have your brisket over the burnt out part of the snake because it's not going to cop any direct heat there. But for this cook, because we've got a really small brisket, this is pretty much going to be all good right about there for the whole cook. Alright, so like I said, some rendered beef fat would be perfect to chuck in that wrap, because it would essentially be replacing what that brisket didn't have to start with, which was intramuscular fat and a nice amount of top fat. But butter is going to do a fantastic job anyway. It's going to help add moisture and flavour, which is exactly what we want. So what we're going to do now is we're just going to leave it until we reach an internal of about that 205 Fahrenheit or 96 degrees Celsius. But we're going to make sure it's probing really nicely. It might need to go a bit further. I'm tipping it's probably going to need to go a bit further because of how lean it is, but we will come back later and see how we go. All right, so we're just over 4 hours into this now, and we're pretty much at our target temperature. So let's open it up and have a look. All right, as you can see from when you wrap it, you lose a lot of that nice bark. So it's starting to probe quite nicely, still a bit of resistance there. So what I'm going to do to finish this cook off and to get our bark back is we're just going to finish off by boating it. So we're basically going to leave it in the foil, but we're going to leave the top exposed. So I'll set that up now. Right, we'll put our lid back on and let it go again. Alright, so finishing it off in that boat is going to help us retain moisture whilst getting our bark back. And what we're going to do now is simply just leave it until we are happy with probe tenderness. Now that might not be until we get to 210 or 215 Fahrenheit internal. I'm not too fussed. As long as it's probing right, I'm going to be happy. So we're just going to check it every 30 minutes until we're happy and come back then. Alright, it's been an hour since we've changed it over to the boat. So this will be my second check. As you can see, that bark has come back beautifully, so I'll have a probe around. I can still tell that it's not quite there, so might give it about 45 minutes to an hour this time, and we'll come back again. Alright, it's been an hour since we last checked on it, so about 2 hours total in the boat. Let's have a probe around. Oh yeah, it's starting to feel a lot better now. We're at about that 210-ish range. Yep, I'm pretty happy with that. So let's get it out and give it a rest. Alright, so before we rest it, we just want to stop that cooking process. So we're just going to get it out the Weber and we're going to let it sit at room temperature for about 4 or 5 minutes just to stop that cooking process. And then we're going to wrap it back up in foil. And if you want to rest it for a really long time, if your brisket's done early for whatever reason, you can wrap it up in foil and then wrap an old towel around it, store it in an esky, and that is going to stay warm or hot for 4 hours plus. But we're ready to serve this in about an hour, so I'm just going to leave it wrapped in the foil and in the esky, and then we'll come back and slice and serve it. All right, moment of truth. Have we been able to turn this into something? I'm not expecting it to be the best brisket ever, but have we turned it into something half decent? We will see. Ooh, bit of juice in there. It's always a good sign. Always make sure you're slicing it against the grain. Bit of moisture in there. Oh, it's quite tender. That's not too bad. Definitely plenty of moisture in there. Tasty. Keep slicing away until we get into the center. The first sort of outer slices always aren't the greatest. I mean, that's not bad. That's pretty decent. Nice little smoke ring on there. I'd be happy with that. Love this knife as well. This is the This is a Dow Strong 10-inch butcher's knife. I'm quite impressed. I honestly didn't think it would come out this good. I mean, like I said, it's not the best brisket ever, but that is enjoyable. That is still got some moisture in there, and considering it's a flat, that's good. The point ends are usually my favorite because they don't dry out as much. There's a bit more fat in there, but that is about as good as you're going to get for a cheap, lean supermarket brisket. I think that was like $13 or something like that. But yeah, there you go. It can happen. I'm going to go eat the rest of this off camera. We'll see you next time.